Dr. Phil raised his hand. "Stop the cameras," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the studio like a blade. The producers froze. The audience went silent. Even the boom operator lowered his equipment. For the first time in the show's history, everything stopped. Not for a commercial break. Not for a technical issue. But because a woman sitting in that chair, clutching a worn white envelope to her chest, had just said something that changed everything. Her name was Eleanor. She was 62 years old. And for 38 years she had been carrying a secret so heavy that it had shaped every relationship in her life, every decision she made, and every night she couldn't sleep. Now, in front of millions, she was about to let it go. But how did we get here? How does a grandmother from Ohio end up confessing something on national television that she couldn't even tell her own family? Let's go back to where this all began. 3 weeks earlier, Eleanor's daughter, Amy, had submitted a letter to the Dr. Phil show. The subject line read, "My mother has been lying to us for decades, and I don't know who she really is anymore." The letter described a family fractured by mistrust. Amy had discovered inconsistencies in her mother's stories about the past, dates that didn't add up, people who supposedly existed but couldn't be found, and a photograph hidden in the attic that showed her mother with a man none of them had ever heard of. When the Dr. Phil team reached out, Eleanor hesitated. She didn't want to come. She didn't want to face the cameras, the audience, or the truth. But Amy gave her an ultimatum. "Either you tell us what really happened, or you lose us forever." So Eleanor booked the flight to Los Angeles. She packed one small suitcase. And she brought the envelope. The envelope had been hidden in the back of her closet for 38 years. It was yellowed at the edges, the handwriting on the front faded but still legible. Inside was a letter, a photograph, and a hospital bracelet. She had touched it 1,000 times over the years but never opened it in front of anyone. Until today. The studio lights were brighter than Eleanor had imagined. The audience was larger than she expected. And Dr. Phil, sitting across from her, had a way of looking at people that made them feel both exposed and understood at the same time. "Eleanor," Dr. Phil began, "your daughter says you've been keeping a secret from your family for almost 4 decades. Is that true?" Eleanor nodded slowly. Her hands gripped the envelope tighter. "Can you tell me what that secret is?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The audience leaned forward. Dr. Phil waited. He didn't rush her. He knew that some truths take time to surface. Eleanor's voice cracked. "I don't know if I can say it out loud." Dr. Phil leaned in. "Eleanor, whatever you're holding on to, it's been hurting you for a long time. And it's hurting your family. You came here because you're ready to let it go. So let's do that. Together." Eleanor looked down at the envelope. Then she looked up at her daughter, Amy, who was sitting in the front row of the audience, tears already streaming down her face. "I had a son," Eleanor whispered. The studio went completely silent. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil didn't move. He didn't interrupt. He let the words hang in the air, because he knew that what Eleanor had just said was only the beginning. "You had a son," Dr. Phil repeated softly. "And your family doesn't know about him." Eleanor shook her head. "No one knows. Not my husband. Not my daughters. No one." Amy stood up in the audience. "What do you mean you had a son? Mom, what are you talking about?" Dr. Phil turned to Amy. "Amy, I need you to sit down for a moment. I know this is hard, but let your mother finish." Amy sat, but her hands were shaking. Eleanor took a breath. "I was 24 years old. I wasn't married yet. I was dating someone. His name was Michael. We were young, and we were in love, and I got pregnant." She paused, wiping her eyes. "My parents didn't approve. They said if I kept the baby, they would disown me. Michael wanted to keep him, but I was scared. I didn't know what to do." Dr. Phil's expression didn't change, but his voice softened. "What happened to the baby, Eleanor?" "I gave him up for adoption." Her voice broke. 3 days after he was born, they took him away. I never even got to hold him. I signed the papers, and they took him, and I never saw him again. The audience was frozen. Some were crying. Others sat with their hands over their mouths. This wasn't just a confession. It was a wound that had been buried for nearly 4 decades, and now it was bleeding in front of everyone. Dr. Phil stood up. He walked over to Eleanor and knelt beside her chair. Eleanor, look at me. She did. You've been carrying this alone for 38 years. That's a long time to carry something this heavy. I didn't know how to tell them. Eleanor sobbed. I got married 2 years later. I had Amy and her sister. I built a life. But every birthday, every Mother's Day, every time I looked at my daughters, I thought about him. I thought about the son I gave away. Dr. Phil stood and turned to the audience. This is what shame does. It doesn't just hurt the person carrying it. It hurts everyone around them. Because secrets like this don't stay buried. They leak out in 1,000 different ways. He turned back to Eleanor. Do you know where he is now? Eleanor nodded. I hired a private investigator 6 months ago. I found him. She held up the envelope. He wrote me a letter. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. You have a letter from your son? Yes. Have you read it? Eleanor shook her head. I've been too scared. Dr. Phil looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to the control room. Hold on. He looked at the producers. We're not moving forward until she reads that letter. Right here. Right now. The producers nodded. Dr. Phil turned back to Eleanor. I want you to open that envelope. And I want you to read what your son wrote to you. Because whatever is in that letter, it's going to set you free. Eleanor's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded carefully. She unfolded it slowly, and as her eyes scanned the first line, tears began to fall. Read it out loud, Dr. Phil said gently. Not for us. For you. Eleanor's voice shook as she began to read. Dear Eleanor, my name is David. I'm 38 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I've known I was adopted since I was 7, and I've thought about you every day of my life. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. I don't know why you gave me up. I don't know what your life was like back then. But I want you to know that I'm okay. I had a good childhood. I have a family of my own now, a wife and 2 kids. And I don't blame you. The audience was crying now. Amy was sobbing. Even Dr. Phil's eyes glistened. Eleanor's voice broke completely as she read the last line. I just want to meet you. If you're ready, I'll be waiting. She folded the letter and pressed it against her chest. He doesn't hate me, she whispered. He wants to meet me. Dr. Phil knelt beside her again. Eleanor, you've been punishing yourself for 38 years for a decision you made when you were scared and young. But your son doesn't see it that way. He sees a woman who gave him life. And now he's giving you a gift, a chance to be part of his life. Eleanor looked up at him. What if my family can't forgive me? Dr. Phil stood and gestured to Amy in the audience. Amy, come up here. Amy walked onto the stage, tears streaming down her face. She stood in front of her mother, and for a moment either of them spoke. Mom, Amy said finally, I wish you had told me. I wish you hadn't carried this alone. But I understand why you didn't. And I'm not angry. I'm just sad that you've been hurting all this time. Eleanor stood, and Amy wrapped her arms around her. The studio erupted in applause. It wasn't polite applause. It was the kind of applause that comes from witnessing something raw and real and deeply human. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He turned to his team. Get David on the phone. Right now. The producers scrambled. Within minutes they had David, Eleanor's son, on a video call. Dr. Phil brought a monitor onto the stage and placed it in front of Eleanor. And there he was. A man in his late 30s with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Hi, Eleanor," David said softly. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. "David?" "Yeah. It's me." They stared at each other through the screen. No one in the studio moved. This wasn't a TV moment anymore. This was a reunion 38 years in the making. "I'm so sorry," Eleanor said. "I'm so sorry." "You don't have to apologize," David said. "I just want to know you." Dr. Phil stepped back and let them talk. For 5 minutes, the show became something else entirely. It became a bridge between a mother and the son she thought she'd lost forever. When the call ended, Eleanor turned to Dr. Phil. "Thank you," she whispered. Dr. Phil nodded. "This is what happens when we stop running from the truth. We find out that the thing we've been afraid of, the thing we thought would destroy us, is actually the thing that sets us free." But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a plane ticket. "Eleanor, David lives in Portland. You live in Ohio. I don't want you to wait another day." He handed her the ticket. "This is a round-trip ticket to Portland. You're going to meet your son. In person. This week." Eleanor stared at the ticket in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "I'm serious. And I'm also going to connect you with a family therapist who specializes in adoption reunions. Because this is just the beginning. You have a lot of healing to do, not just with David, but with yourself. And we're going to make sure you have the support you need." The audience stood and applauded. Eleanor clutched the ticket and the letter to her chest, overwhelmed by the weight of what had just happened. Dr. Phil turned to the camera. "Here's what I want you to take away from this. Secrets don't protect us. They imprison us. And the longer we hold on to them, the more damage they do. If you're carrying something, if there's a truth you've been hiding because you're ashamed or scared, I want you to know this. The people who love you want to know the real you. Not the version you think they need. The real you." He paused. Eleanor came here today thinking she was going to lose everything. Instead, she got her son back. That's what happens when we choose honesty over fear. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Eleanor left the studio that day with more than a plane ticket. She left with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in nearly 4 decades. The envelope, once a symbol of shame and secrecy, had become a symbol of hope and reunion. 2 weeks later, Eleanor flew to Portland. David picked her up at the airport. They hugged for the first time in 38 years. And though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, there were still conversations to be had, wounds to heal, and relationships to rebuild. They were finally walking it together. Dr. Phil received a letter from Eleanor a month later. She thanked him for giving her the courage to speak her truth. She told him about meeting David's wife and children, her grandchildren. She told him that her daughters, though still processing everything, were slowly coming to terms with the revelation. And she told him that for the first time in her life, she felt whole. The white envelope still sits on Eleanor's dresser. But now, instead of hiding it, she keeps it out in the open. It's a reminder that the truth, no matter how painful, is always worth telling. And that healing, though it may take time, is always possible. Dr. Phil's work isn't just about solving problems. It's about helping people find the courage to face the parts of themselves they've been running from. And on that day, in that studio, Eleanor found hers. The story of Eleanor and David isn't just a story about secrets. It's a story about redemption, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. It's a reminder that it's never too late to tell the truth. And it's never too late to heal. But Eleanor's journey didn't end with that reunion. The weeks following her confession were some of the hardest of her life. She had to sit down with her husband, Tom, and tell him about the son he never knew existed. She had to explain to her daughters why she had kept this part of herself hidden for so long. There were tears. There were hard questions. And there were moments when Eleanor wondered if she had made the right choice by speaking up. But every time doubt crept in, she would look at the photograph David had sent her, a picture of him holding his 2 children, her grandchildren, smiling at the camera. and she would remember what Dr. Phil had told her. The people who love you want to know the real you. Tom struggled at first. He felt betrayed, confused about why Eleanor hadn't trusted him enough to share this burden. But after several therapy sessions, arranged by Dr. Phil's team, he began to understand. Eleanor hadn't kept the secret because she didn't love him. She kept it because she didn't know how to love herself while carrying that shame. Her daughters, Amy and Rachel, went through their own process of acceptance. They had spent their entire lives thinking they knew their mother completely. Now they realized there was a whole chapter of her life they had never known about. But as they met David and saw the kind of man he had become, something shifted. They realized that their mother's decision 38 years ago had given David a chance at a good life. And now, they had a brother. David visited Ohio for Thanksgiving that year. It was awkward at first. How do you build a relationship with family you've never known? But as the evening went on, stories were shared, laughter filled the room, and something beautiful began to take root. Eleanor watched her children, all three of them, sitting around the table together, and she felt something she hadn't felt in decades: completeness. Dr. Phil followed up with Eleanor 6 months later in a special update episode. She walked onto that stage a different woman. Her shoulders were lighter. Her smile was genuine. And when Dr. Phil asked her how she was doing, she didn't hesitate. "I'm free," she said simply. "For the first time in 38 years, I'm free."